Okay, good job on that first point. Thank you very much, everybody, for staying around at whatever time it is for you and joining me in this sort of second symposium. So I'm going to be talking about a study that's hopefully soon to be published, knock on wood, fingers crossed, with Felicity O'Connell, who's also my PhD student. And the study is about veracity and temporal distance effects on the level of details in statements about intentions. And I wanted to start this talk by thanking the abstract reviewers, because I got some really useful comments back from them on how I could make this clearer for the actual presentation. So I really appreciate that. So I'm going to be, or the study that I'm talking about is sort of inspired by is a big word, but partly based in something often known as CLT, construal level theory, not to be confused with the CIT, the concealed information test. And this theory was sort of first published in parts in the late 90s by Lieberman and Trope, who conveniently have their pictures on Google Scholar, so I could steal them for this presentation. And to be really sort of rough and unnuanced about this theory, what this theory says is that when people think about a concept, so that can be anything, they think about these things with a particular construal level. And these construal levels run from high level to low level. And the theory sort of says, well, if someone holds a concept at a high level, that means that they're holding it in quite a sort of abstract way. Whereas if they're holding it at a low level, they're more specific about it, they're more detailed about it. And you can measure that construal level in, for example, how many subdivisions they make. So as an example, there's a big difference between imagining going on holiday to Japan next year and imagining going on holiday to Japan tomorrow. If I'm imagining myself going on holiday to Japan next year, I'm thinking about the food and the cities and everything I'm going to see and cherry blossom and stuff like that. If I'm thinking about going on holiday to Japan tomorrow, I'm thinking about what time do I have to get up? What time do I have to be there? Do I have my toothbrush? Stuff like that. So that there is a sort of gradation in how people can think about these things. And you can measure that construal level by looking at how many steps people describe things in. So if you ask somebody if you're going on to Japan next week or tomorrow and be like, well, how many steps is this going to take? Or tell me about this. And then they will give you more detail or take more steps if they're holding that idea, the low construal. If it's a high construal, people are more abstract, more vague, they can make less subdivisions. And the theory was sort of expanded later on in the year zero, or whatever we call that decade, to think about things that affect this construal level of these concepts. And the first one that was actually studied is temporal. So the theory started off as a theory of temporal construal. So that basically says that the closer something is in time, the lower its level will be. So the more detailed it will be, the more specific it will be. But then later this was expanded by a whole range of different things that affect construal level theory. And one of those is likelihood. So this was done by Waxlack back in 2006. And he said that events are more likely have a lower construal. So things that are more likely are more specific, more detailed. And this is where there is a good link to deception research. And that link was not made by me. Sofia Calderon from Gothenburg University did a whole PhD about this. But you can basically say, well, if somebody's lying about something, it is almost by definition unlikely. And therefore, when liars think about things or think about their lies or describe their lies, they should do this at a lower construal level. So if you're interested in this idea, read all of Calderon's work. She has some very interesting, somewhat contradictory results in some of her studies, or like with her different studies against each other. So I would totally advise you to go read that. But basically what I want to take away from her work is I wanted to look at, well, if construal level theory is right about this, then construal level theory should be generating cues to deception for us. So we could think about getting more cues to deception from measures that are already in use in construal level theory. And the other thing that construal level theory then brings to us is it says, well, it's not just that the veracity of something or the likelihood of something affects how specific or how detailed people are. It's also when that concept is going to occur, when that event is going to occur. And because I'm interested in detecting lies about intentions, to me that was really interesting, because if it's very difficult or very different to think about going to Japan next year compared to going to Japan tomorrow, it might also be very different to lie about going to Japan next year versus going to Japan tomorrow. And that might suggest that when you think about detecting lies about intentions, there might actually be time limits where we might only be able to detect lies about intentions if they occur in a particular time window. So that's what I wanted to study. So I got a study that I didn't actually, well, I did this study, but I did it a long time ago. I reused the data from something I did a long time ago. And I wanted to have 100 participants, but then the recorder didn't work for one of them. I had 99 of them left. And they were interviewed about their intention about a particular day. So the main question was basically, what are you going to do at this specific date in the future? And then we asked some of them to tell the truth. We asked some of them to lie. And we varied the date on which this interview was actually held. So some people were interviewed on the same day as the intention they were talking about. And some people were like more than 60 days beforehand. There's a funky little distribution here. I didn't try to make this contribution. It's very much dependent on who rocked up on which day, but you can see there's sort of big spikes around sort of 20 days before and 40 days before the date they're talking about. So that's sort of the range of time that we're looking at in this study. And then what we did is we coded for detail level, and we coded for a wide variety of different types. So we look at visual details and auditory details and spatial details, etc. And then we ran some complex mixed effect models. I can talk about that in the chat if people are interested. I use JASP because my R coding isn't good enough for this. Another hint, which of these presentations isn't about technology. And what do we find? Nothing. Yeah, I'm really sorry. This presentation is a little bit like going to see the Mona Lisa. There's just no. Well, we did find that some participants provided more details than others, and exactly what question you asked them, like they responded with more details to some questions than others. And also they gave like more visual details than they gave auditory details, but we got absolutely nothing interesting about either veracity or temporal distance. So not sure exactly what's wrong here, because I think the sample size is good enough. So one thing that concerns me, it might be that when we deception people talk about detail, we're actually talking about something different than what construal level theorists are talking about when they say detail. So it might be that because I coded the interviews much in the same way as most other deception researchers do, but that's not necessarily how construal level theories look at it. So it could be that even though both sort of literatures say, oh, this is about specificity, this is about detail level, they're actually meaning something different when they say that. The other options may be simply that veracity and likelihood don't actually match. So that when we started thinking about, well, actually, if lying is likely, like lies are almost by definition of low likelihood, that might just not be true. And specifically, it might be the case that asking people to engage in these lies, so going through the interview, trying to deceive the interviewer, that actually drives the construal level to change. That they're actually looking at, that's going through the process of creating the lie might make it become closer to you and might change its construal level. And earlier this year, there was an interesting new paper about construal level called this. So this is the other possibility. It might be that the entire idea of it simply doesn't work out. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to me give this rather disappointing presentations, but I hope it's still useful to someone.